Welcome to the Restricted Handling Podcast. This is what's been going on in China in the past 24 hours. We're going to start where we started before, because it's still the gravitational center, the US-China summit track. President Trump is still scheduled to head to Beijing March 31st through April 2nd. That hasn't changed. What has evolved is the texture around it. The Supreme Court decision limiting portions of the tariff framework is now fully absorbed into the diplomatic environment. The administration rolled out a new global tariff rate over the weekend, announced at 15%, implemented at 10%, and Beijing publicly says it's conducting a comprehensive assessment. It's not fireworks. It's not escalation. It's that very controlled tone that suggests both sides are trying to keep the runway clear for the summit while still preserving leverage. And here's the subtle shift from what we discussed previously. We're now seeing more visible coordination on the European side. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is in Beijing this week, first official China visit since taking office last May, and then he heads straight to Washington. That sequencing matters. Europe isn't picking sides, but it's definitely repositioning. Merz brought roughly 30 German business leaders with him. He's visiting Mercedes-Benz, Siemens, and others. At the same time, he's expected to raise concerns over Chinese subsidies, the valuation of the renminbi, and Beijing's continued backing of Vladimir Putin 4 years into the Ukraine war. Germany still pulls more than 10% of blue-chip revenue from China. And German industry remains deeply dependent on Chinese rare earths and intermediate inputs. So when Merz talks about de-risking, he means diversification, not decoupling. Beijing, for its part, has been very eager to host Western leaders lately. Britain, Canada, France, Spain, and now Germany. The messaging is quiet but clear. China wants to present itself as stable while Washington debates tariffs and enforcement authorities. And Taiwan remains the silent subtext of all of this. As we've covered before, arms packages remain sensitive, but now we're also seeing Taiwan shift into election security mode. President William Lai has ordered Taiwan's National Security Bureau to form a task force ahead of the November 28th local elections. The threat list he outlined is classic modern political warfare: disinformation, fake polling, election gambling, tourism inducements, economic leverage, cyber attacks, infiltration efforts. It's not dramatic, it's systematic. On the military side, Taiwan tracked 5 PLA Navy vessels around the island between Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning. That's not a spike. That's part of the ongoing rhythm we've been describing. Aircraft and ship activity incrementally normalized since 2020. But here's where the nuance shifts a bit. In the South China Sea, the Philippines publicly accused Chinese forces this week of jamming Starlink connectivity near Scarborough Shoal. Officials said internet service dropped when vessels moved within about 24 nautical miles of the feature. A Chinese Navy frigate, hull number 554, Tongliao, was observed nearby along with China Coast Guard vessels. If that assessment holds, that's not just maritime presence. That's electronic interference against commercial satellite services. It's gray zone activity with sharper edges. And satellite analysis shows China's maritime militia maintained record deployments across 12 features in 2025. At Mischief Reef, accumulations exceeded 200 vessels on multiple occasions. Not symbolic, not sporadic, sustained. Meanwhile, land reclamation appears to be advancing at Antelope Reef in the Paracels. Dredging began after mid-October, and by January, imagery showed new infrastructure and access ramps capable of handling roll-on, roll-off vessels. That's the early stage of how a sandbar becomes something else. Now let's pivot to Japan, because this is a developing pressure campaign. China added 20 Japanese entities, including Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, JAXA, and Japan's National Defense Academy, to an export control list restricting access to dual-use goods. Another 20 firms, including Subaru, were placed on a watch list. We talked about tensions before, but this is more formalized now. Rare earths, machine tools, battery components, chip equipment, these aren't symbolic commodities. They're structural inputs. This move follows Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's November comments that Japan could assist in a Taiwan contingency. Tokyo has lodged formal protests. It's not subtle messaging from Beijing. Alignment with Taiwan's defense posture carries economic friction. Now let's zoom out to the Western Hemisphere for a moment. Panama has taken control of the Cristobal and Balboa ports at either end of the Panama Canal after its Supreme Court annulled the concession held by a Hong Kong-based company. A Danish firm, APM Terminals, is serving as interim operator. Chinese officials say they will safeguard enterprise rights. But the symbolism is clear. Infrastructure once associated with Chinese investment is shifting under pressure. And when ports move, geopolitics moves with them. On the semiconductor front, there's another update worth noting. A senior Commerce Department official testified that none of NVIDIA's H200 AI chips have been sold to Chinese customers yet, despite conditional authorization last month. That's important because enforcement questions have been circulating. At the same hearing, officials acknowledged chip smuggling remains an active problem. So while the U.S. tries to maintain high-end export controls, the reality of diversion and workarounds is right there in the open. And stepping back, Taiwan still produces roughly 90% of high-end chips globally. TSMC continues expanding in Arizona. NVIDIA and other firms are committing to U.S.-based production. But advanced packaging processes remain heavily tied to Taiwan. Supply chains don't relocate at Twitter speed. They relocate at construction speed. Now, under the surface, literally. Satellite imagery shows a new Chinese nuclear-powered attack submarine, designated Type 09V or Type 095 at Bohai Shipyard. Estimated displacement between 9,000 and 10,000 tons, roughly 360 feet long, likely incorporating X-shaped rudders, a pump jet propulsor, and 8 vertical launch cells. Analysts estimate China is launching around 3 nuclear-powered attack submarines per year. That's tempo. At the same time, China's ongoing military corruption purge has reduced the Central Military Commission from 7 members to 2. Xi Jinping and newly promoted Vice Chairman Zhang Shengmin. Former Vice Chairman Zhang Yoxia is under investigation. He Weidong was expelled last year. So, modernization continues, while the top command structure remains temporarily thinned. Hardware expansion alongside political consolidation. And just to round out the information competition piece, in Australia, former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd denied assisting a man charged with reckless foreign interference linked to alleged contacts with China's Ministry of State Security. The individual was reportedly approached via LinkedIn in 2021. This isn't Cold War theater. It's LinkedIn messages and export licenses and port concessions and dredging barges. Thanks for listening and being part of the RH community. Please take a moment to leave a 5-star review. If you want to see some changes, email us at info@restrictedhandling.com. We also publish a daily written intel brief on Substack, where you'll find even deeper coverage of Russia and China, along with insights on Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK.